In this lesson, we're going to be talking about audit logs and settings. So an audit is something where you are checking for the existence of something. So as I go through an audit, I may be looking for whether you're doing something particularly. And when we're talking about audits specifically for Windows, for example, there are some policy settings that I can turn on so that we can audit specific events, meaning we can look for the existence of them and they would be logged so that later on we could find them. So rather than talking in abstracts, let's just look at the audit policy and look at what we can set. So under Administrative Tools, I'm going to go to Local Security Policy, and that's where I'm going to find the audit settings or the audit policies. So if I go into local policies here, there's my audit policy, and really it's a pretty small set of things, although it has a lot of, maybe not a lot of detail, but there would be a lot of log information that would be generated from these specific policies. So for example, audit account logon events. So I could audit a success or a failure of local account logons. So when I were to log on to a system, if I were to check success here, every time I logged on, it would generate a log message. When different services have accounts associated with them, if there's something that would trigger this account logon, then you would see a log message resulting from that. So you could generate a lot of log messages doing account logons, and of course I could do a failure instead of a success. So anytime I mistyped my password, for example, then I would get a message in the log indicating that a logon attempt had failed. So account management, I would get messages related to the creation or deletion of user accounts on the system. Directory service access has to do with the fact that a lot of information, particularly in an enterprise setting, is stored in an Active Directory or a lightweight directory access protocol directory. And so that would be things like computers and printers and users and a lot of different information about the resources that are in the enterprise network. And so we would audit directory service access. I could audit logon events, which is similar to the account logon events. I could audit object access, and there are a lot of objects actually that are in the Windows system. So we may be talking about registry values or files, or any number of different things could be considered objects or would be considered objects under this local policy here. So that could generate a lot of log messages and a lot of information about what's going on the system. Anytime a policy changed, so anytime I went in here and made a change to this policy, for example, it would generate a log message. I could audit privilege use, so anytime something happened that required administrative privileges, that would get logged. Process tracking would generate a lot of log messages. And if you're ever wondering what's going on with these or what this means and what you would actually be logging, you could flip over to the Explain tab, and it says success auditing is enabled. An audit entry is generated each time the OS performs one of these process-related activities, and a failure is when the OS fails to perform one of these activities. So that would be like process creation, process termination, handle duplication, indirect object access. All of those sorts of things would get logged, whether a success or a failure. And then finally, we've got system events, and you can see here that would be like a system time change or a system startup or shutdown, and various other things like a security log size exceeding a particular warning threshold, for example. So that's the audit policy and doing auditing under Windows. Now, I could also do auditing under Linux, and it's a little bit different. There's, first of all, a daemon, and a daemon is a service that starts up and runs in the background, and it could either be started up by a user at any given point, or it could be started up as part of the boot process. So if I look inside, here's all of the services that could be started up at boot time. So these are all initialization scripts that start up various services. You can see there that there's an audit D on the left-hand column about a third of the way down or so. There's audit D, and that's a service that allows the kernel to do auditing on different things. So I could, for example, I could use audit control, and I could specify a rule here. So I'm actually going to say the shadow file, which is where user passwords are stored. And now I'm going to specify a policy. So anytime the shadow file that we're going to be watching, anytime there is a read, an append, or a write on this, so WAR is write, append, read, and that's my policy. Anytime any one of those things happens to the shadow file, I'm actually going to generate a message, and I'm going to specify a key here that says shadow file. And I actually, if I'm going to run this, I have to be an administrator, so I'm going to run with sudo, which is going to give me temporary administrator privileges. So I could set that policy up, and then let's just see here. Let me just do the shadow file. And if I were to do something like that, just make a quick change to it and write to it. If I went to the log directory now, and I took a look at the files, it's probably in, and again, a lot of this depends on what you've got set up in your syslog, and without going to actually look at the syslog, I am going to guess that, oh, there it is right there actually. So I'm going to go into audit, and I can't go into audit because I get permission denied, so let me become root, and then I'm going to go into audit. And what do I get for a log there? Well, I've got the audit log, and now I'm going to look at the audit log and the log messages at the end. And you can see some different messages here regarding settings that had changed. So there's some group file settings, and there's password. And so this would be where you would have the log messages that would show up would be, in this particular case on this system, the way it's set up would be in var log audit. But that's where you would be looking for messages from your audit control daemon, and that's where those messages would show up, and you could be looking for those and alert on them for like an intrusion detection system. Or if you're doing a forensic examination and you want to see when those things changed, you could just go into that log file and you'd be able to find that information. But that's doing auditing both under Linux or Unix-like operating systems and under Windows.